I'm really pleased to see so many people here. I was worried because it's a movie. It's what year is it? It's 54 years old. This movie. Um, I'm 64. I saw it when I was 10, and I'm still not over the experience. Um, as I said, as I started to say earlier, I'll just speak for 5 or 10 minutes, and then we can talk. Um, so both the novella and the movie, as I said earlier, are really important. Uh, it's okay. Um, Philip Roth was 25 when he published Goodbye Columbus, and it began this enormous controversy over his work. Not so much the novella Goodbye Columbus, more the stories. It's Goodbye Columbus and 5 stories, and it was the stories that pissed people off. And interestingly, the stories would not have shocked anybody if they had been published in Commentary or another Jewish magazine. What upset people was that he was writing stories about Jews where they were behaving badly in the ways that Jews often or sometimes do behave badly, and often Gentiles often also behave badly. But it was like he was sharing family secrets with the world because they appeared in the New Yorker. And that was Shan Goyim. I hope I pronounced that all right. My parents used to speak Yiddish when they didn't want me to understand them. So and there was a famous night at Yeshiva University where a rabbi got up and said, "In the Middle Ages, we knew what to do with Jews like you." But it had a lot of support. Saul Bellow, writing in Commentary, gave the book a rave review. And he pointed out something that's, I think, very important and very interesting, which you can see in the movie too, which is that Roth was capturing this moment where Jews were moving from the city to the suburbs. Their new problems were the problems of wealth rather than of struggle. And you see Neil in this movie; it's perfectly captured that he doesn't fit in either place. And a number of themes of Jewish American literature for the next 50 years are captured in this tiny little novel. It's really a remarkable thing. My partner and I had dinner last week at the New York Historical Society for Robert Caro, and we were sitting with a woman named Patricia Volk, who I'd never met before, but she's published a book about the novel that changed your life, and she asked me what novel did that for me, and I thought about it, and it was Goodbye Columbus. Now, as far as the movie, I'm writing a book now on the history of American Jewish culture in the post-war period, and the whole chapter on Goodbye Columbus. So I know too much about it, and I can't figure out like what's important and what's not. As far as the movie goes, interestingly, it was the first movie, I believe, that Bob Evans put out when he became president of Paramount Pictures. The second movie he put out was The Godfather. And he fell in love with Ally McGraw, and then she left him for Steve McQueen, and it really almost like messed up The Godfather. Like he collapsed over that. But again, as I said earlier, there was this long period where the mostly the Hollywood moguls were almost all Jews. Maybe Walt Disney is really the least Jewish of them, but they would never put Jews on the screen because they were terrified, in part by the House Un-American Activities Committee, of being accused of using their power to put in radical ideas. They were the head of the House Un-Affairs Committee was a man named John Rankin, and he said that long-nosed reprobates, the people who killed our Lord, were poisoning America with one movie theater at a time. And it worked. And they also didn't want to. They cared about profits, but so they created this idea of America that just was like sort of a Leave It to Beaver idea of America. And as I said, the producers and the graduates were sort of puncturing the whole. But Goodbye Columbus was the first real opening it up, and I think it's kind of remarkable. This like the wedding scene to me is very brave. The tennis scene, by the way, was filmed at my high school. Another reason that this movie made a big impression on me, besides Ally McGraw sweating. Um, but I think the movie's very brave. I actually a few years ago I went to a film festival at Lincoln Center with the Jew about the Jew wave, and Elaine May was speaking after they showed the Heartbreak Kid. Interestingly, you can say that the Jew wave began with Goodbye Columbus and ended with the Heartbreak Kid. It's a short period of time. And I said to Elaine May, I said, why in all these movies about Jews in the 1970s do the Jews behave so badly? And she said, it's only the Jews who think the Jews behave so badly. Everybody else thinks it's okay. Everybody else understands that people are people and they have these flaws, which I think she may be right. I mean, she's Elaine May. She probably is. But anyway, so I could say a lot. You know, it's very interesting to me that Goodbye Columbus won the National Jewish Book Award in 1959. Does anyone know what won it in 1960? Anyone want to guess? Exodus. And Philip Roth and Leon Uris got in a big fight about what was appropriate for Jews to write about and say. You can imagine. Anyway, I think that I think it's a wonderful movie, but I think it also is wonderful in its honesty. It's kind of a fantasy, but it's also kind of really honest. I grew up in the book takes place in New Jersey, but as you see, the movie takes place in Westchester, and I grew up.
I was wondering because the demographics had changed in over the decade.
Well, it's just I guess they thought people would recognize Westchester more than I actually snuck into the same movie theaters that they were sneaking into. Anyway, I don't want to keep talking, but I think it's a wonderful. The movie leaves you with a really rich feeling, and yet it's true both to the novel, which I don't think is necessary in a book or a novel, but it happens to be. But it's also true to its moment. It's a really important. I'm a historian. It's a really useful historical document, and it also is a wonderful predictor of the future. Accidentally, I guess that's part of Roth's genius, but also the integrity of the film. So I'm really pleased to be able to share it with people who've never seen it before. In case that's some of you. Okay, that's all I have to say.
I was one of those people. I was very happy when he chose it. I had suggested something completely different, and he said, "No, I would like to do Goodbye Columbus," and I hadn't seen it, so I was like, "Great!" So I'll discover something new, and I saw it today. And I was, in terms of the adaptation, it's interesting to me because it felt that it was very faithful. I mean, the little touches, the swimming trunk when she pulled, there are certain things that are really literal, certain lines, and yet I found the film more a higher level of satire. Than the book, and also the book is all in his point of view, and the film is it's a more satirical thing, and it's just the time had passed, so it was a different writer. What do you think it made that?
Well, as you mentioned earlier, I teach. I've seen this movie now. I've been teaching for 21 years. I've been teaching the same course every semester for at least a decade, and I always teach this book. So I've seen this movie a lot. By the way, I've never seen it on a screen so beautiful. I want to say that was a new experience. It's really great to see it here. I show it on a screen in the classroom. But when I teach my students, I insist that it's unfair to say it didn't follow the book. Books and movies are two different things, and they can't. Books are about interiority, and movies are about impact. I mean, generally speaking, this movie, as I said, is remarkably faithful to the book. That's neither good nor bad, I wouldn't say. It happens to be, I think, in part because it's such a short book that they didn't really have to leave anything out important. And usually, I'm a little wary of saying see the movie if you've read the book, because the impact of movies in our heads is much stronger usually than words on a page, and it replaces it. Don't ever see the movie of War and Peace. Don't do it. But this movie, This movie, I think it complements the book because it's subtle. It's not. It doesn't hit you over the head. I have some problems with the plot. Like I don't. First of all, whoever takes a vacation at their girlfriend's house? I never heard of such a thing. And also, this is more interesting. I always ask my students on the final, if any of you are going to take my class, you know I'm going to give you one of the questions now. Did she leave the diaphragm there on purpose? I think so too. But you can make an argument either way. But I also think that in that time and place, in 1969, Jewish parents would not be so upset to think that their daughter was sleeping with their boyfriend. Okay. Um, 69 is when the movie came out. 59 is the book, and 69. Anyway, but
Italian parents would have been incredibly
Yeah?
upset. Yeah.
it's a well, okay. But like I said, I think that most of the credit goes to young Philip Roth, 24-year-old Philip Roth, and the movie is an incredibly faithful adaptation. But I also think it was very brave to make this movie so early, because as I said, Jews behaving badly in ways that people accused Jews of behaving badly was a very new thing. Philip Roth later said that 15 years after the Holocaust, talking about the novella, 15 years after the Holocaust was probably too soon to ask people to look at their flaws. And he had great sympathy for his critics as an older man. Not at the time. At the time, he was fighting, but as an old in his when he got to be around my age now, he said maybe that was understandable, the crap that he took as a result.
It's interesting. Raise your hand if you have a question. There's one there, Susan.
Hi. It was really wonderful to see this movie again after many, many years. I'm curious about how you feel about the B story, the library story, not being resolved in the film the way it is in the novella. That the incident with the child somehow doesn't come to full fruition. And I think that incident makes Neil more likable in the novella than he necessarily is in the film. Do you?
Well, I think that's the most likable thing about him in the film as well. It's also really interesting. There's a lot, this is this kind of thing that English professors write about now. There's an awful lot written about the role of the black boy vis-a-vis black Jewish relations, and is to what degree is he real? To what degree is he imagined? Carlotta is also Carlotta, I think, is much more prominent in the movie than in the novella. But the idea, there's a whole literature about black Jewish relations where why did they go sour? Why was the Black Jewish Alliance of the early civil rights movement, during which Philip Roth was writing this book, why did it turn so badly? And there are a lot of reasons, but one of them is that black leaders began to feel that the Jews were not so much supporting them, well, as they supported them, were being condescending towards them, were not being respectful, because they felt they were either, to use a contemporary phrase, using their privilege, or the fact that they were paying for so much of it gave them a certain power. That's part of the story. And if you look at this, if you look at the way black people are portrayed in this movie, you've only got Carlotta and the kid. And it is kind of condescending on the one hand. And it shows Neil is uncomfortable. He has this moment with Carlotta, but she's like having none of it. She rolls her eyes. And the purpose of them is almost to show that Neil is a good person. And they really ought to have more humanity than that, on the one hand. On the other hand, the thing I try to teach my students, one of the most important things I try to teach my students is to have some degree of historical imagination. And if you put yourself in that time and place, when Roth was writing, when this movie was being made, that was not nothing what they were doing. I guess I should make this point also. The thing about the Jew wave is that it wasn't so much about Jews. It was about everybody all ethnicities getting their say. That America was no longer just white Protestant. So you were having black movies, you were having feminist movies, you were having Jewish movies, The Godfather, the Jews had their moment in this period, but it was part of this whole sort of ending of white male hegemony, which is actually something to think about today about who's being attacked. Okay, who's under attack from the white male hegemonist political movement today? It's yes, there's an uprising in anti-Semitism, but there's also an uprising in violence against all kinds of people, of which Jews are identified, with whom Jews are identified.
Okay, next. Yeah, hold on.
I'm a little shook up by seeing this movie again. And I think what I want to say is more of a comment than it is a question. But I think I saw the movie, read the book the first time when I was 17. And I saw the movie when I was 22. And now I'm 77. And my interpretation of the movie today and what it means is so different. And I don't think that we saw it as a Jew movie back then. It was a movie about a young man and a woman and how young women wanted to be treated and how their lives revolved a lot around men. And now I see it as such an anti-feminist film that I didn't back then. And so I think just examining it from the context of Judaism and the wave of Jewish films misses, I think, the point for those young women who experienced the movie back then and the book back then and what it meant to them. So I think it's just a different context of the way you look at it.
Interesting. Thank you.
Hold on, there is one right there. She's
Oh, am I allowed to have the mic? So?
yeah.
Oh,
There's
okay.
one person ahead of you.
Sorry. I thought someone else was going first. No, I was just going to say it's interesting because I read the book in college, and that was 30 years ago. But first of all, I just want to say one thing about the two Black characters. I felt like everybody in the movie was a caricature to some end, and I also saw it. Like, it's funny because we were just had a Jewish wedding last night. Mm-hmm. And I also, I've read probably all of Philip Roth's books. And I think that he like grew up in this time where he had so many feelings about like being suburban Jewish. And I feel like that's what I saw. Not that this was like how Jews act and everyone should see. It was almost like his like tinge of it. Like I thought that wedding scene was kind of horrifying. Like I didn't find it like, oh, it's like this is how Jews act. I thought it was like yeah, like it was almost offensive, especially based on everything that's happened this year. So that was mine. But I loved seeing it, and I loved it. Never mind. Go ahead.
I think.
My question had to do with more maybe coming from a very like I'm not originally from this country, so I kind of don't get the whole all the subcultures, and so coming from like a completely different perspective, like I'm a bit obtuse about it, and so I was wondering, I think if maybe you could explain what you think the main themes are. Like, it's not that, maybe it's obvious to everybody here, but like what you think are the main themes of the movie, why you think it's so brave, what it's saying about the Jewish culture. It's not that obvious to me. Why you think it's portraying Jews in a bad way. It's not that obvious to me. And why in the end does she sabotage her relationship with him? Like, there seems to be a big statement about class, different types of Jews. It's not that clear, but maybe you could go through what you think the main themes are, what you're trying to
Time
give
do we have?
Sorry. Maybe
No, I
I'm
think
talking.
I say that because I think it's a very rich work, and there's quite a few things. To me, because this is what I'm writing about, I think it's what's most central about it is this man who's caught between these two historical moments, these two cultures, the culture of his aunt and uncle and the culture of the Timkins. By the way, Philip Roth had a relationship with a woman who was a model for Brenda Timken, and they were. Philip Roth is dead, but if you if you knew Philip Roth, you would have to get an NDA from him because everything in his life was turned into copy. But it's a. I guess if I had to sum it up, I mean, I do think that there's a lot about relationships between men and women and parents and children. But I think what it's about is it's a critique of the American dream. The Potemkins are living the American dream. And Neil is looking at it and saying, this is not what I want. But I don't know what I want. And it's about that moment. Remember, 1969, the American dream, the idea of America was coming under attack, but nobody really knew what to replace it with. And so it's about that moment of confusion. It's about there's no mention of Vietnam in this movie. There's no mention of the race relations is very, very sub rosa, but it's about the idea that the things we're supposed to be yearning for don't work anymore. There's a quote that I just love that was in from a young woman in the New York Times magazine the same year, 1969. She said, "If you haven't grown up in Scarsdale, New York, you don't know what the meaning of hell is." And the neoconservatives who were reacting against the New Left and the anti-war movement, they seized on this quote to say, "This is everything. Everyone should want to live in Scarsdale. This is the American dream," and that's what I think the book and the movie are getting at. That the American dream doesn't work, but we don't know what else there is.
There is that exchange when he say, I don't think about the future. What do you want to become? What do you know? She's trying to extract from him, something that conforms to what her parents' vision of a successful life is. And he's like, I don't think forward. That's why the library is this sort of safe place where I think in the book he talks about moving up to a stool, a tall stool, where like moving up in a department where there's a taller thing.
And the one time he is able to feel good about himself is when he's helping this young black boy reach C. Gauguin, reach higher culture.
Here, okay.
I think he identifies with the little boy in the library because he feels like an outsider himself.
Yep.
And the little boy is an outsider coming in and trying to sort of take in the culture or art or find out about other places. And I think I see them as sort of parallel people in a way.
Right there.
Finally, a question from a man.
The movie really reminded me so much of The Heartbreak Kid and the character I saw, and also Annie Hall, especially the creepy brother. And for me, the feminist theme a little bit is a Jewish man desperate to escape his class by marrying up and not Jeannie Berlin. And I can't think of a movie that goes the other way, of a woman getting out of her class situation by marrying. It's an interesting theme about Jewish men trying to escape by leaving the kinds of women that I guess their mother was or something like that.
Yeah.
So,
thank you. I agree. I mean, I think that studying this movie together with Heartbreak Kid is very useful, very valuable. Interestingly, with Woody Allen, again, this is sort of gossipy, but sort of not. Woody Allen hated Philip Roth. He made a movie about how much he hated Philip Roth. Richard Benjamin is the star of it. It's called Deconstructing Harry. It's the only movie that you're not supposed to root for the main character that Woody Allen ever made because he so hated the Philip Roth character in it. But I think there was a period of time around the time, shortly after the movie, where Philip Roth and Woody Allen both represented what it meant to be an American Jew. And interestingly, they both are intensely anti-religious. They're Jews without Judaism. There's Philip Roth, when he died, he would not allow he wouldn't allow people to say Kaddish at his funeral. They did anyway, but there were instructions that they couldn't. And Woody, of course, mocks everything about Judaism as opposed to Jews. They love Jews and they hate Judaism. And again, if you are really Jewish, without your Jewishness having any content besides, Gladys and her peeling, or bagels and lox Jews is how we really usually refer to them. It's an empty existence. I mean, it's comforting. It reminds you of your grandparents. You like the sort of smell of it, but it's not something that can sustain itself over time. And it's actually playing out right now in complicated ways with regard to Zionism and anti-Zionism that we're not going to talk about. But I think that the fact that the two most famous Jews in America, being Philip Roth and Woody Allen, said something very interesting and maybe disturbing about the state of American Jewry. And yet they're also my two favorite Jews. So it says something disturbing about me as well. Leaving aside the whole Woody Allen thing.
There was someone in the dark there. Yeah.
I am really curious why you elevated Goodbye Columbus over the producers. To me, the producers was group therapy for the entire Jewish community in the U.S. and around the world. It snapped. It put everything into perspective. It made World War II surreal and hilarious and grotesque all at once. And it allowed Jews in America, and I think everywhere, to have an incredible, visceral joy of life, to see how all this could get reconciled and pieced together. And it was exhilarating. That to me was the tectonic product. And the first movie that actually gave Jews a sense of pride was Exodus with Paul Newman. We were all so proud of Paul Newman. And I think that was in the early 60s. So I've used those as the touchstones of Jewish accomplishment in the movie business.
Well, first of all, the producers was a commercial failure when it came out. It's become something that people really like, but and actually love, but it did no business, and it lost a lot of money. And also, they never say the word Jew in the producers. They have Jewish sounding names, but there's no. It's sub rosa Jewry, just like The Graduate is. As for Exodus, it's a terrible movie. It's an incredibly. It's one of the book and the movie. I have a long chapter on the book and the movie Exodus, and I think it's the best chapter in my best book, which came out the end of 2022, which is called "We Are Not One: A History of America's Fight Over Israel." And I think Exodus is incredibly important document in the history of the transformation of American Jews from being sort of having a distance from Israel and then becoming all in. But it's total crap. If it's really interesting, if you look at my book or just do some of the research, the argument between Philip Roth and Leon Uris about the representation of Jews in both Exodus and in Philip Roth's work is really interesting. I think Philip Roth is writing much more truthfully about how Jews really live. And Exodus is, to me, it's a comic book. The movie is even worse than the book. In the movie, the Arabs are actually Nazis. Literally, there are Nazis fighting on the side of the Palestinians in the movie. Leon Uris didn't have the nerve to do that. But it's another story, Exodus. I'm sorry you just touched a nerve because I spent so much time working on this chapter. But yes, Exodus is a more important as in terms of history, of the importance of cinema in our political cultural world. Exodus is much more important than Goodbye Columbus. I just think Goodbye Columbus is kind of wonderful, and Exodus is kind of terrible. And also, how many Jews look like Paul Newman? His father was Jewish. His mother wasn't Jewish.
What do you see? I have a question, and which is, and then we'll wrap it. But it's interesting, the relationship between this and The Graduate. You know, the colors. There are certain things that.
Well, the important thing about The Graduate, thank you. The important thing about The Graduate, aside from it being great, is the casting of Dustin Hoffman in the lead role. When they told, they originally wanted to cast Robert Redford, and Robert Redford said, "I can't play this role. I'm Robert Redford. No one's going to believe me in this role." And the fact that they cast Dustin Hoffman, whose face says I'm a Jew, it doesn't say I'm a Jew anywhere in the movie, but his face says I'm a Jew. That was very important. That was part of the transition. A lot of what I write about in this book I'm working on now is about how visible the Jews are in the transition to Jews becoming central, till you get to Larry David, let's say. I'm serious. But like, for instance, I begin with Arthur Miller in Death of a Salesman. Willie Loman's family is Jewish. They speak in Yiddish cadences. It took Arthur Miller 50 years to admit that they were Jewish. They never say anything Jewish in Death of a Salesman, but they are. He later said they were deracinated Jews. And then you have Saul Bellows' book, The Adventures of Augie March, where they're Jewish. He's Jewish, but he doesn't act Jewish particularly. And then the next step is Goodbye Columbus, where they're Jews and they act Jewish. And, Philip Roth is saying, take it or leave it. And that Goodbye Columbus is the first major cultural statement where the Jews are clearly Jewish and act in Jewish ways, and it's unapologetic, and I think it's great.
Okay, the last one is right there.
Good evening. This has been fascinating for me. I grew up in Maplewood, New Jersey, and was able to identify in the book that that's where Philip Roth pulled together the story. And because I was part of the story, i.e., in that neighborhood, actually living there, do I not realize how truthful this particular novella was, but certainly also this terrific movie. And I thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Glad to hear it. We have one more here.
Oh, sorry, didn't
Talk into one of these. I didn't read the book, so I have no perspective except for the film. But what stood out for me during the whole movie was the fact how I related to the character of the guy, I forgot his name already, but that he went to war. He came back, right? Wasn't he in the service?
Yeah.
And so the way I saw him during the whole movie was someone who was just an observer. He went to war. Not one person in that movie, the father especially, struck me, never asked him about that. Nobody talked to him about it.
Right, it's a single sentence. Yeah. It's just a single sentence in the.
Yeah, so that's how I kind of experienced him as an observer, seeing everything so differently.
Yeah,
and how he treated people differently.
Well, he was in the army. He might not have gone to war. My
he
father was in the Air Force, but he never went to war, and I think that time period, it makes sense. Yeah.
Oh, so yeah, that's what I kind of assumed. I just found it very curious that no one talked to him.
No, I mean, if you think about the timing, he wouldn't have been to war. He wouldn't. Korea was too early, and certainly World War II was way too early. So he would have been in the military. There was still a draft, but he wouldn't have seen.
Didn't serve.
He wouldn't have seen.
Okay.
Well, not in 1959. From
when he wrote the book, but in the
right,
movie,
but they specifically left that out of the book. Yeah.
Yeah, I just found that. Oh well, it makes sense if he didn't serve. Yeah.
No, he served, just not in war.
Yeah, not in war though. Yeah.
Okay, last one. No, sorry, it's because it's dark. I don't see the hands. No.
That's okay. Well, okay, I'm from Ohio originally, but I'd like to know why was Ohio State featured, and why did they call it Goodbye Columbus? And it was painted scarlet and gray. The house.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure it was the best choice, but it was a symbol of Jewish assimilation. He was saying we're playing football for Ohio is as American as you can get. And there was nothing Jewish about this family except for the parents' memories of what they used to be. Yeah, but we never saw anything remotely religious except the wedding. And they were so proud of their football playing jock, who, by the way, I don't want to insult Ohio State, but it's not Harvard or Yale. It's not where Jews wanted to send their kids. It's just about becoming American. Right? No, but that's Americanness. It's not particularly Jewish, and that's why I think Roth chose it. Roth went to Bucknell, a place where also he wanted, where you could be American. He got his master's in Chicago, but he left Newark or Weehawken to go to Bucknell, and it was a very self-conscious choice about going out to America rather than, he joined a fraternity. Very, very important moment in, again, before 1967, the idea of being Jewish, if you weren't Orthodox, was a very lightly held idea. And I think he was investigating that or maybe mocking it, but I think that's pretty clearly what he was after, particularly calling the book Goodbye Columbus. It really is a weird title for this book. Yeah, I know, but there was no song in the movie. I mean, in the book. No, there was a song, but it's not what I would have called it. Anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Eric. Thank you.